The station wagon is dead, which is weird because America never stopped buying station wagons. We just started calling them minivans, sport utility vehicles, and crossovers, then pretended the old family hauler had vanished. Think about the original scene: rear-facing jump seats, fake wood grain down the side, luggage strapped to the roof, kids waving at strangers through a giant back window, with zero concern for aerodynamics or dignity. For decades, that was Suburbia on wheels. It carried groceries, dogs, baseball gear, camping tents, and entire childhoods. So what happened? How did the most useful vehicle in the driveway become a punchline? The thing movie dads drove when life had clearly defeated them. This is not just a story about changing taste. It is about fuel rules, image problems, clever marketing, and a country that wanted the same practicality with a tougher costume. Today we are tracing the wagon from hero to embarrassment to hidden legacy. Before the station wagon became a suburban badge of honor, it was basically an airport shuttle for the railroad age. In the early 1900s, hotels, resorts, and train depots needed vehicles that could haul passengers and their trunks from the station to wherever they were actually going. These were called depot hacks, and they were not glamorous family cars. They were working machines with car frames up front and big boxy wooden bodies in back, built by coach builders who understood carpentry as much as mechanics. Think of it this way: the early wagon was a car trying to do truck work before America had invented the modern family hauler, and those early Woodies had real charm. Ash and maple panels, varnished by hand, gave them a warmth that stamped steel could not fake. They looked like rolling lake cabins. But that beauty came with a catch. Wood needed constant care. It swelled, cracked, leaked, and rotted if owners ignored it. These wagons were expensive to build, expensive to maintain, and not exactly ideal for people who hated chores. Still, the blueprint was there. More people, more cargo, one vehicle. Once World War II ended, America suddenly had suburbs, babies, highways, and money. That humble depot machine was about to find its perfect habitat. The station wagon did not conquer America by being cool. It conquered America because the American schedule got completely out of hand. By the early 1950s, the country was building split-level houses, shopping centers, school districts, and highways like somebody had given the suburbs a blank check. Families were getting bigger, yards were getting wider, and suddenly every errand required a car. The grocery run was no longer a quick walk down the block. It was a planned expedition involving paper bags, bottled milk, frozen peas, and at least one kid licking the window. The sedan, which had been perfectly respectable before the war, started to feel like a suit jacket after Thanksgiving dinner. It could carry the family, sure, but add a stroller, baseball gear, beach chairs, luggage, and the neighbor's child who somehow came along, and the trunk surrendered immediately. A pickup truck could haul the stuff, but for a middle-class family in 1955, a truck still felt like work. Mom was not loading the Little League team into a farm truck unless something had gone terribly wrong. The wagon solved the problem cleanly. It drove like a car, parked in the driveway like a car, and still swallowed the evidence of family life: groceries, dogs, suitcases, bicycles, camping gear, and children arranged in ways no modern safety engineer wants to discuss. So here is the real turning point. What happens when Detroit realizes that practicality does not have to be sold as compromise? What happens when usefulness becomes something families actually aspire to? Detroit did not just build wagons. Detroit put tailgates on status. By the mid-1950s, every major American brand wanted a piece of the family hauler gold rush. Ford had the country sedan, and the dressed-up country squire. Chevrolet had wagon versions of the 150, 210, and Bel Air, then gave the world the gorgeous Nomad. Plymouth, Dodge, Oldsmobile, Buick, Mercury, Pontiac, Chrysler, everybody joined in. The message was simple. This was not a utility body anymore. This was the same American dream, just with more doors and a place for the cooler. And because it was Detroit, useful was never allowed to look humble. Wagons got two-tone paint, chrome spears, jet-age tail fins, wrap-around glass, pillarless hardtop styling, and interiors that looked ready for a motel postcard. The Chevrolet Nomad was basically a concept car that accidentally had room for groceries. The Chrysler Town and Country wore its name like it owned the golf course. Ford's Country Squire leaned into fake woodgrain so hard that fake trees became a luxury feature. Only in America could simulated lumber become aspirational. Then came the Oldsmobile Vista Cruiser in the 1960s with raised roof glass that made the back seat feel like an observation lounge. Was it necessary? Absolutely not. Was it brilliant? Completely. This is where the wagon crossed the line from vehicle to family universe. It was where vacations began, where siblings fought border wars, where dogs got the best window, and where parents quietly measured their success in cubic feet. Detroit had taken the boxiest idea in the showroom and wrapped it in chrome, optimism, and just enough nonsense to make people want it. For a brief moment, the station wagon was not the alternative to a family car. It was the family car. By the late 1960s and early 1970s, the big American wagon had become a rolling living room with license plates. These things could stretch over 18 feet long, carry 8 or 9 people, swallow luggage, coolers, beach chairs, sleeping bags, fishing poles, and still have room for one mysterious paper grocery bag nobody claimed. This was the golden age of the family road trip. Dad aimed the hood ornament at the interstate, Mom managed the paper map, and the kids sprawled across giant bench seats like tiny landlords. The way back was not a cargo area, it was a children's district. Seatbelts existed, technically, but many parents treated them like optional decoration. If you survived a summer afternoon stuck to a vinyl seat, congratulations, you were forged in fire. And the features felt magical. Fold-flat cargo floors turned the rear into a camper, rear-facing third rows let kids stare directly into the headlights of traffic behind them, which somehow passed for entertainment. Two-way tailgates dropped like a pickup or swung like a door. Roof racks carried luggage boxes, canoes, and everything Dad overestimated his ability to tie down. Some wagons had panoramic glass that made the back feel like an airport observation deck. Think about it. Before minivans, before sport utility vehicles, before every family needed a device charger in every row, this was the command center. Drive-in movies, motel pools, little league games, national parks, beach vacations, the wagon was there. If your family had one, comment the model because somebody watching still remembers the smell of hot vinyl and spilled orange soda. But the same traits that made these cars beloved were starting to look dangerous. They were huge, thirsty, heavy, and excessive. Soon, America would stop calling that freedom and start calling it a problem. At the peak, some full-size wagons were longer than a modern Chevrolet Suburban. And somehow Detroit looked at that and said, yes, the family car needs more hood. This was peak excess. The big wagons of the late 1960s and early 1970s rode on the same bones as full-size sedans. And full-size sedans were swelling like parade floats. Chevrolet Kingswood Estate, Ford Country Squire, Plymouth Fury Suburban, Buick Estate Wagon, Oldsmobile Custom Cruiser. These were not cars you parked. You docked them. Under the hood, V8 power was practically assumed, not because every parent needed muscle car speed, but because moving 2 tons of steel, glass, wood grain trim, children, luggage, and a cooler full of sandwich meat required serious torque. On the highway, they were smooth, quiet, and confident. At the gas pump, they behaved like a horse drinking from a bathtub. And Detroit had every reason to keep building them this way. Big cars meant bigger profits, and wagons were cheaper to develop because they shared platforms, engines, dashboards, and doors with sedans. Think of it like making one giant family-sized pizza, then cutting it into sedan, coupe, convertible, and wagon slices. The wagon was just the biggest slice with a tailgate. For buyers, the size still made sense as long as fuel was cheap and plentiful. A giant wagon could haul the family to Yellowstone, bring home plywood from the hardware store, and make every neighbor understand that you had arrived in the suburbs. But the math was fragile. These cars were amazing when gasoline was background noise. They became a liability the moment fuel prices turned into a headline. And that is where the story stops being nostalgic and starts getting painful. Because in the early 1970s, something outside Detroit was about to make America question the entire idea of the giant family car. Then gasoline stopped being cheap, and the station wagon's whole business model started coughing like a cold carburetor on a January morning. The 1973 oil embargo was the first punch. Prices jumped, lines formed at gas stations, and suddenly the family truckster that got 10 or 12 miles per gallon did not feel like freedom. It felt like a monthly bill with fake wood on the side. Then the late 1970s brought another fuel shock, and buyers learned a painful new habit: looking at the mileage sticker before looking at the third row seat. At the same time, Washington was changing the rules. Emission standards meant engines had to run cleaner. Corporate average fuel economy rules meant automakers had to sell fleets that used less gas. In plain English, Detroit was being told your best-selling meal has to be cheaper, cleaner, lighter, and healthier. But customers still expected to taste like the old one. That is a brutal restaurant order. The old wagon recipe was simple: big body, big V8, soft suspension, huge cargo area. Now every ingredient was under attack. Weight hurt fuel economy, power hurt emissions, size made the numbers worse. Even chrome, glass, and steel started looking like enemies on a spreadsheet. So automakers downsized. They did not immediately give up on wagons. Chevrolet, Ford, Chrysler, and American Motors all tried smaller bodies, smaller engines, and smarter packaging. Some of these cars were genuinely practical, but the magic was thinner. A downsized wagon could still carry groceries and kids, but it no longer felt like a rolling basement with seatbelts. That mattered because wagons had sold abundance. Once abundance became expensive, the image cracked, and waiting just off stage was a new kind of family hauler. Boxier, taller, more efficient with space, and not burdened by your dad's country club wood grain memories. The station wagon did not get murdered by a sports car. It got mugged in a school pickup line by a box with one sliding door. In 1984, Chrysler launched the Dodge Caravan and Plymouth Voyager, and they basically hit the reset button on the American family car. The floor was lower because it used front-wheel drive. The cabin was tall and upright, so children, groceries, strollers, coolers, and one mysterious bag of soccer balls could all stand up inside. The sliding side door worked in tight parking lots, which meant fewer door dings at the mall and less parental screaming at Little League. Coolness was irrelevant. Parents bought the brutal logic. Think about what a wagon buyer actually wanted: space, easy loading, room for children, a vehicle that did not feel like parallel parking an aircraft carrier. The minivan gave them all of that in a smaller footprint than many old wagons, with better visibility and a seating position that made mom and dad feel like bus captains of Suburbia. And Chrysler needed this win badly. The company had just survived near death, and the minivan became its miracle product. By the late 1980s, these things were everywhere. School zones, church lots, beach vacations, driveways with basketball hoops over the garage. The wagon still had history. The minivan had cup holders, headroom, and a door that made sense. That is the perfect robbery. It did not steal the wagon's image, it stole the wagon's job. But there was a catch hiding in plain sight. Once a vehicle becomes the most rational choice in America, fashion eventually starts looking for an escape route. The escape route had mud tires. By the early 1990s, families were still doing the same errands: school, groceries, soccer practice, the hardware store. But the vehicle in the driveway started telling a different story. That image mattered. The Ford Explorer arrived for 1991 and gave suburban America a perfect fantasy package: tall seating, four-wheel drive vibes, a big square hood, and enough room for the kids. Most owners were not blasting through Moab on the way to piano lessons, but they liked feeling prepared. Height looked like safety. Chunky tires looked like confidence. The wagon looked like yesterday's family duty. Automakers loved this shift for reasons that had nothing to do with mountain trails. Trucks and SUVs often sold for more money, shared parts with pickups, and carried fatter profit margins. They also lived in the light truck category, which meant different fuel economy rules than passenger cars. In plain English, the government treated them more like work tools, while customers increasingly used them like family cars. That was a beautiful loophole with leather seats, so the wagon got squeezed from both sides. The minivan beat it on usefulness, and the SUV beat it on emotion. One was better at hauling juice boxes. The other made hauling juice boxes feel like a survival expedition. But here is the funny part. As SUVs got bigger, heavier, and more truck-like, plenty of families started wanting something lower, smoother, and easier again. The wagon was not done. It was just about to come back wearing a very clever disguise. Then the crossover made the perfect getaway car for the station wagon. In the mid-1990s, automakers quietly rebuilt the wagon idea without using the word wagon. The Subaru Outback was basically a legacy wagon with extra ride height, plastic cladding, and a name that sounded like it came with hiking boots. Toyota's RAV4 and Honda's CR-V took the same family car logic and wrapped it in mini SUV confidence. Unibody construction, decent fuel economy, easy parking, hatchback cargo space, and a driving position high enough to make everyone feel in charge of the school pickup line. Think about the comedy of this. Then they bought millions of vehicles with 4 doors, rear lift gates, fold flat seats, and cargo areas designed for strollers, dogs, groceries, luggage, and one emergency trip to buy patio furniture. The disguise worked because crossovers changed the meaning. A wagon carried responsibility, a crossover suggested choice. Same basic mission, better costume. By the 2000s, 3-row crossovers like the Toyota Highlander, Honda Pilot, and Ford Explorer's later unibody versions were doing the old country squire job without the fake wood and social baggage. And be honest, what is parked on your street right now? A compact crossover, a mid-size crossover, maybe a 3-row family hauler with roof rails that have never met a kayak? That is the final twist. The station wagon did not really die. It became a ghost haunting every driveway in America. The station wagon is dead only if you are staring at the badge. Look past the marketing and the old shape is everywhere. The Subaru Outback is a wagon in hiking boots. The Audi RS6 Avant is a wagon with a gym membership and anger issues. The Mercedes E-Class wagon is country club practicality. The Volvo V60 Cross Country is the sensible shoe that somehow looks expensive. Even the luxury sport utility vehicles with sloped roofs and giant cargo areas are still chasing the same promise. Carry people, carry stuff, look like a life you want to have. That is why the wagon might be America's greatest vehicle, not because it won every drag race or because it looked best on a poster, but because it solved ordinary life with almost suspicious honesty. Kids, dogs, luggage, groceries, road trips, plywood, baseball bags, beach chairs, all in one car that did not need to pretend it was invading a mountain. The tragedy is that the word wagon became radioactive, but the need never went away. Automakers changed the costume, raised the roofline, added cladding, and sold the same basic answer back to us. So maybe the comeback already happened. Maybe America did not reject the station wagon. Maybe America just asked it to change its name. Thank you for watching. Now I want to hear from you. What was the greatest American wagon ever built? Which one did your family have? And would you buy a real wagon today, or are you already driving its ghost? Remember what this machine did. It started as a workhorse, became the suburban hero, turned into a golden age icon, got wounded by the gas crisis, was mugged by the minivan, and came back disguised as the sport utility vehicle and the crossover. That is the lesson. Americans do not always reject an idea. Sometimes they reject its picture. Thank you for watching. Write a comment with the wagon you grew up in, the one you would revive, and whether sport utility vehicles are just wagons in hiking boots. Like, subscribe, and suggest the next forgotten American machine.